consistent or that anything about it is consistent. The theory of evolution and the assumption of how old the thing should be based on the layer it's in, that drives the consistency, because only the dates that agree with the theory are published. Well, that's not science. That's, they did the same thing in the Soviet Union. Find a teacher 10 years ago, and get a teacher and put him in the Soviet classroom 10 years ago, have him stand up and say, boys and girls, I don't think communism works. I think capitalism is a better theory. What would happen to that teacher? Well, he'd be shoveling snow in Siberia if he survived. And I would be willing to make a prediction that if a teacher in this university stood up and said in their class, I don't think evolution, the macroevolution, is a reasonable theory. I think it's never been observed. It's purely a religion. I think creation's a better explanation for how we got here. He wouldn't be shot or go to Siberia, but he'd probably lose his job.
I would be willing to bet the $10,000 you have on the table that that wouldn't happen if the faculty member had tenure. Even if he didn't, it simply wouldn't happen.
Are you familiar with Dean Kenyon at Stanford University? Dean Kenyon wrote books about evolution. He was a strong supporter of evolution. He got converted and became a creationist. He wrote the book of Pandas and People. They tried to fire him, but he was already tenured. Stanford University, they made him a lab assistant. Call Dean Kenyon and ask him if there's any prejudice against creationists. 10,000.
Do I get time to?
If you wouldn't mind, I'd just like to give you
15 seconds.
All right.
Which again is, I caution you to check the factoids always, mine as well as Kent's.
I agree.
And I would be willing, I'd be interested in talking to Dean Kenyon if you'll give me his phone number, email, or address.
Sure. And I can give you a list of others who've been censored over creationist teaching. But anyway, let's take some of the questions here.
A couple questions from the audience, and once again, so that we can get a couple of these through, we'd like to ask that you limit your answers to about 3 minutes. The first question is directed to Dr. Hovind. The question is that you keep stating that evolution is a religion. In order to help explain this, could you please give us a definition of religion and explain how evolution fits into this definition?
I would say a religion, by that I mean something you have to believe in without any empirical scientific evidence. I guess I would contrast science, things that we can observe, test, demonstrate, with religion as in something we have to believe in, but you cannot see it or observe it, for instance. So I guess that may be a loose definition of religion. Webster's dictionary definition is, a religion is belief in a divine creator or creators that brought the universe into being. So the evolution theory is a belief in how the universe came to be. So it fits all the criteria of a religion with the Webster's dictionary definition.
Dr. Moore, a response perhaps at why it is not a religion?
The theory of evolution by natural selection is not a religion because it's falsifiable. And it has, even beyond that, it is a valid scientific theory in that it has withstood numerous tests of its falsifiability. I can conceive of data right now that we might gather that would convince me that, or would in effect falsify the theory, and it would have to do with finding this pervasive pattern of homology among genes. Again, when the molecular era, the era of molecular genetics dawned on us, it was conceivable that we would begin to look at genes and that we would find that there was no pattern of relatedness among them. And if that had been the case, I would have given up the idea of evolution immediately. And I want to mention another point that we really should talk about and we haven't, and that is what empirical evidence is. It seems to me as there's an abundance of empirical evidence, not only for macroevolution, but for the connection between macro and microevolution. And so in order to say that macroevolution is not a science, or that it's a religion, we need to find out what the empirical evidence is that Kent and other creationists would accept that would falsify it as a scientific theory and would move it across Popper's line of demarcation from science to religion. It seems to me like the empirical evidence is overwhelming in support of an evolution theory.
What you're referring to is
in
empirical
support
evidence.
of macroevolution in particular.
You think there's empirical evidence for macroevolution? Is that what you said? I didn't catch that last.
Yes, I think there's overwhelming empirical.
Would you please give me an example?
Okay. Would you consider humans and chimps two distinct kinds?
I would consider humans and chimps two distinct kinds, absolutely.
Then why is there this level of genetic similarity between the two? But I really don't need to ask you that question.
I'd like to have the question.
The challenge is, though, is that a test of a prediction of evolution theory? And evolution theory predicts that all species arose from previously existing ancestral species, and that means that they not only acquired their anatomy by a process of modification through evolution from the common ancestor, and so one should see homology at that level, but you should see homology at the genetic level as well. And moreover, if independently we had a phylogeny that told us that there was a particular order in which a particular set of species arose, based on anatomical studies, and so it's independent of the molecular data, then molecular data comes along decades later, and we use that to generate a phylogeny in the same way, and the two are identical. I consider that strong support for a continuity. And this is really what the test of macroevolution is. It's continuity versus discontinuity across kinds.
Dr.
The humans and chimps, I would say, are different kinds of animals. I would not argue there are literally thousands and thousands of differences. You chose to look at the DNA sequence between humans and chimps, and it is a certain percentage of similarity there. I could point out that a watermelon is 97% water, and a cloud is 100% water, only 3% difference, and a snow cone is 98% water, as is a jellyfish, by the way. So snow cones and jellyfish are identical if you want to make the water content the criteria. If you're wanting to make the DNA the criteria for humans and chimps, that's fine. There are a lot of similarities. To me, it's pretty obvious. There's a common designer. I would say there's thousands of similarities between different computer programs that are all produced by Microsoft. Not because they all evolved, from hieroglyphics, but because the same guys are designing these programs. That's why. And so that's why there's such a similarity between the the DNA sequencing of the animals. And by the way, if you want to compare the eyeball, then the humans are closest to an octopus. If you want to compare cytochrome C, then we're closest to a sunflower. If you want to compare the milk, where the human milk that's produced is closest to an ass, a jackass. So it depends what you want to compare. What the evolutionists have done is they've taken the example that they think fits the theory and ignored all the evidence that does not fit the theory. The humans, for instance, have a Broca's convolution, a section of the brain that allows us to speak. Apes have no such section. The foot structure is absolutely, totally different. They have a grasping foot where we do not. Apes and chimps, neither one can touch all their fingers to their thumb. I would say the hair distribution on the body is pretty obviously different in some cases. So it depends what you want to compare. I would point out that the Honda